Welcome to the Maui Pono Network interviews for the 2024 elections. I'm here with Dan Johnson, who is running for state representative for District 12. Also joining me is Bruce Douglas and Ann Picathley, who also be asking questions of Dan. So Dan, welcome. Nice having you here with us.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Paul, Bruce, Ann. Nice to speak with you, Ann.
So this is obviously, a big responsibility that you're looking at in terms of being our representatives, and it covers a lot of different areas for District 12. Could you give an overview, Dan, about what, first of all, motivated you to take this step and to get involved in politics in this way? And also, what would you do and what have you done so far for the different parts of the districts that you'll be supporting?
Yeah, so I decided to run. Actually, this would be the second time I ran. I ran in 2022 as well. Some of the stuff that happened with our um, restrictions of freedoms that happened during that year really first inspired me to look into politics because of how much it affects us. I know a lot of people in passing will say they don't feel like it makes a difference what they do in Hawaii because it's going to be the same no matter what. So I decided to run to bring a different perspective and really represent people because a lot of what we're doing is we have a mindset, unfortunately, I think, that people believe there's one side and there's the other side, and there's right and there's wrong. But the problem is where it falls in the middle because both sides have good ideas, and some people aren't even willing to listen to the opposite side. So really look for somebody that's not looking left or right, but forward. And that's really what I want to bring because I was born and raised in Maui. I don't see myself living anywhere else than here. I have multiple generations here. My children are here. They go to the school systems here, and I'm invested in this community. And to your question about what you've done in the community, so I've been a construction project manager for about a decade now, and I've mostly worked in the private industry. I've worked on state projects, and I've seen how our state spends its money and how it works and how to navigate things like red tape. And then, unfortunately, with the loss of Lahaina, we got a massive amount of rebuilding for housing that we don't even have. We were already short, and now we're short another few thousand housing units. But as far as the community that I've been involved in, I've mostly helped with church and a nonprofit organization that I assist in. And we've been getting a partnership with the Maui Food Bank and the Common Ground Collective. So we have a food distribution set up every Friday at Haiku Cannery. We're giving out food to those in need to help support food security. And then we're also organizing throughout the state with an organization called Reach Global to get volunteers and missionaries to come help Kula. So with Lahaina, all the FEMA attention and the majority of everything is focused on that. But there were 20 something homes that were lost in Kula as well, and they didn't get nearly as much attention. And the thing that we're noticing is 6, 8 months later down the road, all of the cameras and the attention have walked away. You know, some people showed up and they stood there and they showed that they were doing something, but still not very much has been done to help those people outside of the assistance from nonprofits and churches putting their time in to help clear the properties, help rebuild fencing, and bring people back to stability. So those are some of the things that I've done in the recent past for Upcountry, but running for state representative for District 12, that includes everything from Haili'imaile, Makawao, Olinda, Pukalani, Kula, all the way out to Keokea, Kanaio, and a very small north neighborhood in Kihei, Kaiwahine, somehow is in the Upcountry district. So welcome to Upcountry since they redistricted in 2022, Kyle.
Great. Well, you mentioned that part of your civic engagement is working with a church. What church is that you're involved in? And because it seems like they're doing a lot of good work to support the community, especially those in need.
Yeah. So I'm a member of Hope Chapel North Shore, and we meet over on Kokomo Road. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Dan. And Bruce, you have the next question. You're on mute.
If you were going to say what your platform is, what you stand for on the various subjects the elevator pitch of here's my platform, what would it be?
My platform,
Yeah,
it's
what you
I would
stand for as a rep.
I would say that we have too many people in power right now that have a special interest, or they have some other kind of agenda that they're following or moving through. But I'm coming from the perspective of a lifelong Maui resident that sees his friends and family and neighbors and coworkers all struggling to afford the cost of living here. And when they have to move away because they can't afford to live in their own household or in their community, that saddens me. So I'm coming from a perspective where I want to make Maui specifically, but Hawaii in general at large, more affordable. I want to reduce the amount of uh, regulations and things that make everything more expensive. And sometimes that sounds scary to some people, but when you start looking at how many times you have to dot I's and cross T's to get something done, and then you look at Lahaina now not having a single property ready to rebuild, a lot of families that live here that aren't able to basically return to their property. And then you have a state that's saying they may not be able to do what they thought they did before with their property because of a proclamation that changed it. And again, I am a guy that's from here, has a family here, raised here, and I'm for people that are here, people, not corporations or businesses.
And if you make it into the state house, what's important is, what anybody can sit there and just vote yes or no on bills that come forward, but really championing a bill all the way through and seeing it through. If you had 3 bills you could put forward and work on passing, what would those be?
So first, I would say that we need more representation in our government. We have the most powerful governor when it comes to looking at things like he has the privileges to appoint our sheriffs, our all of our superintendents for the school system. We don't have elected school boards or elected sheriffs or elected attorney generals. I would like to implement things that let Hawaii residents vote for those offices as many and most other states do. So that would be one, to provide more representation to the people. And then transparency as well comes along with that. Then secondly, I would like to make a few alterations to the tax code, which is super exciting. Get your popcorn ready. I'll talk about all the line items of things that I would change, but more or less the heart would be to take away GET tax on food, which is something that Hawaii taxes. We tax food and we tax medicine, we tax healthcare. We're actually one of the only states, there's only 2 states in the whole nation that tax healthcare. So right there is approximately 5% reduction in healthcare costs. And then food and then transportation and everything to come here is already so high. We shouldn't be taxing food. I don't believe at all, but these are discussions that need to be had in the legislature. And then also through alteration of the tax code, we need to provide incentives for local families to own property here. So we need to have, for instance, I have multi-generational family homes here too, as a lot of people do. And then if they don't have them set up well when they transfer between family members or they sell, there's huge capital gains because of how much it is and all that kind of stuff. So if you have property and all conveyance taxes, they have a various amount that they charge when you transfer property from one to another. I want to exempt that or drastically reduce it when you're selling to someone who's going to sign an affidavit to live there, and then drastically increase that if that's not going to be the case, so that we're putting more purchasing power back into Maui and Hawaii homeowners' hands. So those are some of the things. I could obviously continue to expand on some more, but yeah, what else would you like to hear?
Thank you for that. I'll pass the next question on to Anne.
Yeah, so in the district that you would be governing, you have a lot of land, a lot of farms, and not a lot of water. And it seems like a continued drought, which may or may not have contributed to the Kula fire. But I guess recently the county nixed that idea of having a foreign contract. I mean, from I guess Chicago based come here and drill wells, and then also wanting to provide affordable housing there. But how do you feel about that? I mean, what are solutions that you could do at a state level to protect, have water rights? And I mean, I know there was a charter amendment in the last election that passed about giving the county authority over EMI.
Yep. So actually that I provided personal testimony at the County of Maui for that, in favor of that. It's a multi-layered issue, as I'm sure you're well aware, because we have the county with our Board of Water Supply, a private agency, which is passed down from AMB, EMI, and those organizations that manage the water. But the DLNR ultimately has the responsibility for the water as it's written in the I believe it's HRS 247 or 174. I was just looking into it very recently. But anyway, the statute regarding water says that the water is the right of the people. And then it goes on so and forth to say that the state Department of Land and Natural Resources issues the leases. And the question is, who is becoming the lessee? So that's been what's changing, so on and so forth. This is one area of government where we have private sector involved in water, and we don't have we almost have an apathy, I believe, in my opinion, toward funding it because they have somebody else managing the lease. So 160 years ago, the EMI dug all those canals through A and B, and they just like are letting them manage it. And that's been kind of out of sight, out of mind. And I don't think that they've even truly wanted to take the lease on as a county from the state, but I would strongly encourage the county to do so and to take that lease. Now, from a state perspective, that gets a little more difficult when you are basically mandating that the county does it the way it's currently written. One way that we would be able to go about this would be amending the language so that you can't have somebody managing it that has a conflict of interest. Like, for instance, one of the largest agricultural producers also managing the water and metering and charging
Right.
everyone. So we could amend the stateside legislation to state something like that to encourage it to be more of an independent or third party organization, even if it is a for-profit or private company managing the water. I'd be on for something like that to propose over mandating.
So you acknowledge that is it mismanagement, or is there actual water shortage, growing water shortage in the Kula areas?
The answer is yes.
Yes, to both.
So there's a sufficient water supply. There's a huge water table. We're one of the rainiest places on Earth. It goes back and forth between Kauai and I think someplace in Indonesia or something. But anyway, the water supply is there. It's the water distribution where we're failing. And specifically for upcountry, they spend money on pumps to pump the water back up the mountain. And that's where these pumps are 50 odd, 100 years old, even some, that they're not maintaining, replacing, because they don't really have an incentive to. And then the water supply getting up to the higher Mauka elevations in Kula is just not there. There's no reservoirs. So there's probably a blend of things that you can do. Like anything, there's no true one silver bullet answer that fixes it. But there's little things that you do, like you change the code so you don't have competing interest. You increase the infrastructure. You actually could have the state, for the best interest of the people, give some grants or funds to the infrastructure because it's still state infrastructure. It's just being managed by other people. So you could have state funds allocated to creating more reservoirs, upgrading pumps, or even drilling for wells. You alluded to earlier that Chicago organization, and I was very excited to go hear what they had to say, and then they canceled the meeting. So that was like 2 or 3 Wednesdays ago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there were a lot of issues about it, like it didn't have an environmental impact statement. It was somebody from, it wasn't local contractors.
Yeah.
And there was no, what do you call it, request for bids.
Proposal. Yeah.
What? Proposal. Yeah.
RFP.
Exactly. Yeah.
I live in RFPs, by the way, with a construction background.
Oh, I see. So
I answer those all the time.
Yeah. So with the outdated system, there's a lot of water waste too. I'm sure you're.
Oh yeah, leaking.
Agree. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Ann.
Thank
And let me go to the next question then. So I have a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned you have a family with children.
Yeah.
And it certainly requires a lot of travel and time spent in Oahu. Uh, how would you deal with that and digest that? And have you been doing those trips back and forth to Oahu, at the present time?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have the full support of my wife. And I have the blessing of having one of the most strong and independent and intelligent women to be called my wife and raise my children with me. So that makes everything possible. And then in addition to that, um, I have been traveling for work. I had to work on Oahu for a couple projects and Kauai and Big Island and Lanai. I've actually worked on every island but Molokai. Um, but I will go for projects, and being a project manager is more of like the finance side of construction. So I'm not a superintendent out there directing work and coordinating on the day to day. I'm more from a not really 1,000 foot view. That's probably my boss's perspective. I'm more like 100 foot view. But I do require to go to job sites often. So I had to take an opportunity a few years ago that was advancing my career, and it was in the best interest of my family. My wife and I, we talked about it, we prayed about it, and it was the best decision to make a step forward to do that. I actually had not spent a night away from my wife for the first 10 years of our marriage until I took this job. And then I ended up just going 3 days a week and coming back and then telecommuting. And then COVID changed everything for the amount of interaction we do on Zoom and Teams and things like that. So started to have more of a hybrid approach. And then um, anyway, long story short, I have traveled for work. I keep traveling. I talked to a couple people who are in the legislature that are traveling, and some of it go about it every day and they fly back. And I'm used to working 10, 12 hour days lately. As of finishing a project, I've just putting in some heavy hours there. So what some people would call a grueling day of work isn't uh more than normal to me. But
Well, it sounds like that's the type of thing that'll be happening also if you do get
yeah.
elected. And I guess the question is then, seeing that you're a finance guy and understand the numbers, when you look at the allocation of funds, the way those funds are allocated on a state level, the amount of money that's going through the system, what's your perspective from when you look at it from that 100-foot level, let's say, even for our state uh, allocation of funds?
Yeah. I can tell you from my professional career, the first time I approved a invoice that was over $1 million, it was like, oh, okay. And then eventually you get kind of desensitized to the quantity and the volume, and you start looking at ratios, numbers, coverages, liabilities, protections, and things like that. So when it comes to the state budget, I am very fiscally conservative. I would like to have our state operate on a balanced budget and forecast and spend what we actually can and need to spend, but more so, it's efficiency. As a project manager, if I managed uh, my projects the way that our state, I believe, manages theirs, in my opinion, I'd be fired. Okay. We can't just be spending exuberant amounts of money in inefficient ways just because that's the way it is. Like, if anything, really, what we need is we need some structural and procedural changes to how we spend our money, and really just some oversight on some of these things. So, um, for instance, I've worked on several state projects where they have the state engineer, the state architect, and the state inspectors, and then you have a third party that they hire to be a consultant construction manager, and they have all those positions, and then they have all these things. And I get it on the very large projects, but on some small projects of a couple of $1 million, which are, you know, 3 to 6 month projects, they will still do all these things. And then you have $400,000, $500,000 worth of overhead that the taxpayers are paying for because somebody that's responsible for construction managing on behalf of the state, it doesn't want to take that responsibility, or they want to rely on someone else, and they have so many layers of coverages and protections that's just quite expensive that ultimately leads to the cost of living and how we spend our money. So these are some things that I see from the outside. I want to get into, I want to implement, I want to refine. I don't want to be that guy that comes in there and says, "You're all fired." That's not my mindset. It's you have to be spending and stewarding the money that you're responsible with reasonably. Imagine if it's your own budget. Imagine if it is your own money. The truth is, it is our money. We all pay taxes to this state. This is our future, our children's future. So we got to treat it with a higher edict of care.
Great. Thank you for that, Dan. And we're going to do one last round of questions. So, Bruce,
And you need to go? Do you need to go first?
I could ask, yeah, I do have to
Okay.
leave in
okay,
about 10 minutes. So, you're gonna be representing the state, and, there's many states in the mainland that are prohibiting a woman's right to choose, and I was just wondering, where you stand on that, Dan?
Right
What
to
your
choose.
personal values are affecting that,
Right to choose. What are you speaking about?
oh,
abortion rights she's
abortion
referring to.
rights, women's rights, right?
Women's rights.
Right.
Yeah. So as a Christian, I have a sincere personal belief that as soon as there's a heartbeat, there's a living being.
Mhm.
And I think this unfortunately becomes such a divisive topic because there's so many layers to it. And then people start going down the extremely obscure things like rape and incest and all these things, which are such a small number of things. But the majority of the nation would agree that at about a heartbeat, whether if that's 8 to 12 weeks or wherever that is, that's life. That's a human being. It's like if you're baking a cake and you put it in the oven and you let it cook, it comes out and it's going to be a cake. But if you pull it out and get rid of it after you already press start, then it was going to be one. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
However, I think that it should be decided with care and with reason, because people have to think about what that's like for mothers that maybe cannot financially afford it. Maybe they don't have a father figure around. So this is where I think the state should actually step in and help more. So I support an organization called the Malama Pregnancy Center. So it's actually right over in Wailuku. They are focused on helping mothers raise their children post-pregnancy. So many people are out there trying to tell you what you can and cannot do with your life, but they don't think about what happens after that decision's been made. So we really have to look at supporting women, supporting young families and children, and assisting them in ways after the fact. So those are things that I would look to support.
So is Malama Pregnancy Center a full service pregnancy center, like Planned Parenthood per se? Is that?
What do you mean by full service?
Well, meaning that they offer birth control, alternatives to pregnancy. They're licensed. They have physicians and nursing staff and diagnostic technicians and counselors.
Mm-hmm. So
Licensed.
they have a licensed lead doctor, and they have a on-staff physician, they have nurses, they have mostly what they have. They're also a very small organization, so what they can do is limited, but they have ultrasound machines so they can give the moms the first image of baby before they make a decision. And then they have a large support network of people that will donate clothing, car seats, and things like that. So they really assist in that way with counseling them through making that decision. And they can choose to go either way they want, but they'll be there to support the family for the longevity of the life of the child
So
too.
I see. So they don't refer out if the person decides, against it, but they don't refer out to other services, I think.
That's ultimately the mother's decision as well.
No resources for that, but that's how they differ, I think, from Planned Parenthood. But so you're personally opposed to a woman's right to abortion, but you're not against. I mean, but it's it's your own personal, you wouldn't make that ruling against in a law or bill, as some other
Uh,
states have, like Texas, Florida, Mississippi, or
well, like I said, I think it's about deciding when life exists.
I see.
The earliest level of viability is like children have been born at 3 months and survived through an incubator, and that clearly shows you that that's life at a certain point. So
Mhm.
that's the discussion that needs to be had. Not the extremes of never, no, never, at any point in time. I really wouldn't support that kind of stuff. But there's so many layers to it. We could probably spend the rest of the next 2 hours talking about how to
Right,
make it ethical.
right.
But then from the other perspective, you have to look at where we are as a state. So if you have a couple voices that are voting a certain way, whether or not that makes a decision or a huge difference.
I see.
But the discussions need to be had for sure.
Right. Well, thank
Thank you,
you for
Dan.
sharing.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Ann.
Anyway, I have to leave, and I'm so sorry. In fact, I didn't plan this well, so
Okay, thank you.
I'll have to cut it
Bruce,
short. Thank you,
okay.
Dan.
Yeah. Bye, Ann.
Bye.
Hi, Dan. So, my question for you is, the big thing that state reps do is get money for their district. That's what they champion. That's what they work the hardest on and prove their valor by. What would you say would be your favorite choices for what you would really campaign and champion to get money for your district? What do you see as the priorities?
We talked about one already, water. So water would be one that I would encourage the state to invest in. I would try to push into our budget so that we have funds to improve the infrastructure in the ways that we just last discussed with the water distribution, water supply increase, and then also through legislation, right, to encourage the management. So water would be a key one that we would need to fund. We have several schools that are needing repairs. There's a budget for DOE every year for maintenance, routine things like that, where we don't let our buildings decay. Unfortunately, Hawaii is very bad at this. We do not maintain our property and our infrastructure. The term deferred maintenance. Hawaii, I don't have the statistic in front of me, but it's one of the lowest in the nation when it comes to taking care of what we've built and what we manage. So there's a constant budget for things like that for schools and perpetuation of programs that are already existing that you need to, ascertain what that amount is and make sure that that's accounted for in the budget. Highways are a particular area of lacking. When I was running last year, I noticed the road as you're coming up country, Haleakala Highway before it turns to Old Haleakala Highway, that old concrete, which was poorly installed, was falling apart. And I stood next to this road and I had a sign that was like honk if you want this road fixed. And I noticed a lot of response from people talking about that. So I called the State Highways Division and I made complaints and I requested and I sent requests for this to be repaired, maintained, and eventually they got through with it in the budget as well. So a huge part of being a representative is also listening to the constituents. So I would look to hold more regular town halls. I don't believe we have very much in our district of that sort of stuff going on, but it would be a nice fresh breath of air to actually have a representative that represents you. So you can come and tell me what you care about, what's concerning to you, and then those things get collaborated into proposing a budget. And one of the other things that's really important is regardless of your background or your policy or your platform or your stance, we need politicians that are accountable to what their testimony are. So we have the ability to submit in favor or opposing. You can submit testimony on hawaii.gov about how bills are moving forward. And we can have bills that have overwhelming numbers of testimony opposing something, but then they just push right through and vote their way. And I think that a true representative of the people would revisit something like that that has overwhelming testimony and change your opinion if appropriate.
So Bruce, let me just do a follow-up on that. You are running against Kyle Yamashita, who has been in office for quite some time, and certainly gets involved with making specific decisions about bills and the way our resources are utilized. What are some of the things that he has really supported or did not support that you would kind of raise a highlight to and just saying, wait a minute, is this really representing the people?
Yeah.
Is this representing big money interests? So if you could just shed a light on that.
Well, since you asked the question, one that comes to mind is recent in this past session, we had a bill that was going forward to raise tariffs on residents for HECO to increase utility rates. And they had like 30 something HECO representatives, of course, that all people that work for HECO that supported in favor of raising the rates on everybody. And they had more than, I think it was 11 or 1200 pieces of testimony opposing it. The incumbent in our district was also the chair finance committee and recorded this bill with, I think it was 7 oppositions. So they didn't record the opposing testimonies. This is something you can see this in Civil Beat. They wrote an article about it. And then the 1200 pieces of testimony that were ignored are still in there. And oh, okay. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of people that don't think that this is in the best interest of the residents of Hawaii. So is that example?
That's a pretty good example, and one that's kind of shocking in terms of representation and how the manipulation of that representation goes on so that they can support big money interest and profits. So, again, we're dealing here. Sometimes we can call some of the Democrat representatives as corporate Democrats. And would you put Kyle in that category?
Yeah, it seems appropriate for the way I would use the term establishment, yeah, or corporate. That makes sense because you have 2 different veins of the Democrat Party as well. So yeah, that's definitely the wing I would evaluate him as in.
And do you see that it seems like a clique as I look from afar since 2018 at what happens in the state legislature? Would you say that is a clique that they all kind of adhere to the same drumbeat that does not support the people in the Āina?
There's definitely a huge force of encouragement of voting the line in our legislature. So it doesn't seem like there's truly any voice of reason. I mean, we have a few representatives that are standing up. Actually want to credit our representative on the west side, who's also a Democrat, that was strong in opposition, being vocal for some of the things like this that were being done. So there are some that are out there that are willing to stand up against the machine or the establishment, the corporate guys, as you're willing to say. But we need more of those people. We need more of those. I would say.
Are you referring to Ellie Cochran?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll give her some kudos on that one.
Sure.
Good. Bruce, this will be our last question. So do you have any other questions for Dan?
Yeah, I mean, Kula is known for its diversified agriculture zone, and a lot of our local produce is made there. What could you do as a rep to enhance the ability of that district to continue and upgrade production of local food for us?
I didn't expressly say it, but everything that I said would, in my opinion, help. So if we increase the water supply, lower the cost of living by reducing taxes on GET, this is something we could look at. We could make food at a lesser surcharge and then no tax on food that was produced in Hawaii to further encourage local production. And those are some things like right off the bat that just tie and meld right in with what I was talking about. Yeah, I look to do things through incentives and encouragement. that's kind of the philosophy that I would subscribe to, that I believe would assist, because I came from a background where I worked in solar projects and I did renewable energy, and there's a tax credit that the state of Hawaii offers in addition to the federal government. So these are things that the state says, hey, we want to encourage these things, so we're going to give you this to do that. And I've seen it work immensely, and you can see the amount of solar penetration that's all over the state, and that's because of these incentives. I think that we could do the same things with businesses that we want to prop up and encourage. And I wanted to apply it to housing. So if you're developing new housing and you sold below a threshold, you could get an incentive to help bring that cost down against the other project that's being built. So not just for projects, because that's just going to develop more land. And I'm a natural conservative. I love how Hawaii looks. I don't want to see it turn into concrete jungle, especially Maui, where I live in my home. But the incentives you could also do, I know you're talking about agriculture, but since I mentioned it, you could do that sale for individual homeowners. Like if I sold my home to someone who was going to live in it as a resident for below a certain purchase price, where you get an incentive in a different form, you're assisting someone else in getting their personal and financial stability.
On that same vein, since you're in construction industry, you have a unique perspective. How would you tackle the affordable housing and lack of housing issue that we have on Maui for our local population?
Yeah, that's definitely like, I'm not a huge let's go build development guy, but when we have an entire city burned down, it's probably okay to rebuild some subdivisions and build some stuff. So we need to actually streamline special permitting for Lahaina to be rebuilt, and we've got all this money, this FEMA money that's coming in to clean up the place and do it. So it just needs to come back to that discussion where I had is the management. We could do it so inefficiently. Like there's a few projects that they're building housing units that are roughly costing about $1 million a house. And it's because of all the way that our planning and zoning commission requires these luxuries, and that it makes housing why it's so expensive. But there's definitely a lot of things that you can do within zoning and planning that will allow for more affordable housing. I think a lot of them are just what's being required to be put on. So like you have to put on solar hot water and solar. And as I personally work in the solar industry and fully vouch for solar, this just further increases the cost, the build cost. So while these things are nice, while heating and climate controls and all these things are nice, they're not essential. So the way it's written, you can only build 1950s subdivisions. That's pretty much how we have our zoning and building code. A lot of this is the responsibility of the county, so that's their jurisdiction. But from a state perspective, when it comes to development of new properties, that's why I've come to the idea of the credits and the conveyance tax changes. So if I was a developer and I was building a subdivision of 100 homes, to classify as an affordable housing project, you can actually build 10 or 12 or whatever the individual judgment is going to be on the property. So each project will get a judgment, and they'll tell you need to have, by the size of what you're building, you're going to need to have 10 of those 100 homes be sold for affordable. And they might call that now like 750,000. But what you're going to do is take that, and then you're going to have an incentive for people to build at a lower cost so that they can make a few nice homes in that, like $1 million homes in the development that they will make money on and profit on. And then they can actually make more of the regular family housing units because they have an incentive, because they're not paying a huge gain on something else. So really what it is you're just dividing things and making it more fair by doing that. And tax code is something that's never sexy. So if you have a way of like letting me know how I can describe this in better or fewer words, I'm all ears. But if I get you in front of a chalkboard, I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. And the final question. You are running against the Democratic machine as a Republican. And certainly there's a belief system, a mindset of the residents here in Maui County about Democrats versus Republican, and usually they don't even consider Republican. As a campaign, especially going over someone who's been incumbent, who gets a lot of money from the Democratic machine so that he can then make some money distributions for schools and things along that line. How would you, in your campaign strategy, deal with this challenge, significant challenge that you have?
I think being able to reach people and describe who you are and what motivates you is everything. Integrity and who you are and what you stand for, to me, is who I vote for. So I don't just run down and see I'm just pigeonholed into being one or the other. I think that like I just commended another one of our representatives, Ellie Cochran on the West Side, for what she did there. That was a huge act, and I think that a lot of that kind of stuff will get people to wake up and say, "Hey, you know what? It's not just a Democrat." Look, because we have these two factions of Democrats. We have these people that are corporate interests, and we have these people that are for the people. And there's a myriad of all different kinds of colors and policies in between there. And then I think, unfortunately, a lot of people in Hawaii have been voting the same way because it's what they've been comfortable with. But my challenge to that person is, this is who I am. This is what I believe. You can tell me whatever your concern is, and I'll have a discussion about it. And I haven't even changed my mind about some things, but the heart of what I care for is providing for families to stay here and not be sold out, to be moved away, being pushed off. This kind of stuff is where people need to be able to look past colors and party lines. And yes, I am a Republican because I do subscribe to a majority of the platform that the new Hawaii Republican Party, by the way, has new leadership with a lot more grassroots involvement just this past couple of years too. So you'll see a lot more candidates, and I would hope that you'll see a lot more Republicans that are running that grassroots mentality, and you don't have them lumped in with the corporate Republicans, corporate Democrats, because when you get to talk to a candidate and you hear about where their heart is, you see them wearing a badge that has their who they're bought by, and they're talking about our big savior is going to be X, Y, and Z corporation or all of this. And anyway, I think that the most important thing is looking at an individual, their personal integrity, what they care about, and see if that aligns with you.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And here at the Maui Pono Network, we also look at two distinct parties here also for the county representatives too. We have those who serve the people and the environment, and those who serve corporate interests. So again, what I hear you saying, Dan, is that you're leaning towards the side that supports the people and the Āina. And
Absolutely.
so I greatly appreciate that. And thank you so much for running. I know that you have quite a challenge in front of you, so I wish you the best. Mahalo.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Thank you,
And for the Maui Pono Network, thank you for viewing in, and we will be having more interviews as we continue then going through those who are registered for our 2024 elections. Mahalo. And become an informed voter, so let other people know and share these interviews so that when you get to the voting booths, you're making good, informed decisions. Mahalo.